Thank you, Neville. Thank you, Richard. And thank you all as members of this local community for being here today. I honour the veterans of Australia who are here with us today. I honour the men and women of the Australian Armed Forces who are with us today. And all of you who have chosen to honour this important ceremony we call ANZAC. War is a very personal thing. Many who have come here to Coorparoo this morning are here because they wish in their own way to honour a father or a grandfather, a mother or a grandmother, a brother or an uncle, a sister or an aunt, a husband or wife, a partner or a friend, the families who have supported them in good times and in bad. As we come here today, we remember their faces, we remember their laugh, we remember their stories. We cherish their letters and the now battered photographs from times long past. ANZAC Day is not simply about a solemn commemoration. It is about deeply personal human memories which run deep into the strongholds of our soul. ANZAC Day is about the ties that bind, the cords that link our past with our present and our future. So as your local Member of Parliament, I honour each and every one of you who have come here today to honour each of your loved ones, who at some time or at some distant place have shared our highest national honour to wear the uniform of Australia. For what you all do today, just by being here, is a good thing. To honour them, and in so doing, honouring also the great family that is this nation that we proudly call Australia. War is not only a very personal thing, but war, in fact, all Australia's wars over the last century affect the lives of all of our local communities, including this one. Here in Queensland, some 57,000 young men signed up to serve in the war to end all wars. Together with our fellow Australians, we Australians suffer the highest casualty rate of all Allied forces who fought in the Great War. Our casualty rate, that is, the dead and the wounded combined, was 65%. 2 out of every 3 who served, killed or wounded. And nor was our own community here in Brisbane spared. In fact, here in our local community, we sent off some 205 of our local sons to ANZAC and to the Gallipoli landings. 131 from South Brisbane, 17 from Bulimba, where I've just been, 15 from Kangaroo Point, 11 from East Brisbane, another 11 from the Gabba, 7 here from Coorparoo, and 7 from West End, 2 from Morningside, and 1 each from Hawthorn and Norman Park. Our community, volunteers, landing at ANZAC Cove. War is a very local thing as well. And many, many others besides across the many battlefields of the First World War, as reflected in the names carefully inscribed in each of our local war memorials, including this one here at Coorparoo. Our losses locally carved a hole both in people's lives and in the wider life of our community. Families were shattered, fiancés killed, maimed, or never to be the same again, and staff members who never came back to occupy the desk that they left from their workplace. No community in Australia, least of all ours, was spared. And each family and each community has its own unique story. My own family story is no different from the rest. My father was an army regular who fought both in Palestine and the Pacific. All of my mother's older brothers served as well, and all returned. My older brother, like Richard, also has worn the uniform Australia as an Australian Army regular in Vietnam. My mother too supported the war effort as a nurse, both at the Mater over there and towards the end of the war at what was then called the Greenslopes Military Hospital over there. War was a very personal thing for my mother, as it was for so many young women of our district here. She told me once she had a beau, a very 1940s word, a beau, who she planned to marry after the war. His name was George. He joined a predominantly Queensland battalion called the 2nd 25th and served both in North Africa and New Guinea. Since my mother's passing some years ago, I've now read the letters she left behind. They're so much like many of the letters exchanged between couples separated by the geography and the uncertainty of war. George's Christmas card from New Guinea, replete with the Australian Military Forces censor stamp attached. Makes you wonder how you censor a Christmas card, but there you go. For Christmas of 1942, addressed simply to my mother, care of the Mater Hospital, South Brisbane. Things were simple in those days. His earlier letter from Darwin, where he declared that Darwin is a very dull and uninviting place. A terrific contrast, he went on to say, with Nambour. I'm quoting him. I'm not inventing this. A terrific contrast with Nambour, as a matter of fact, George went on to say, with only about 3 hotels in Darwin, 1 picture theatre and a few shops. Before any Territorians here become offended by my comparison, please bear in mind that my mother came from Nambour, as did I, and George, it seems, was very determined to impress my mother. In fact, we only had 1 picture theatre in Nambour. The other thing that strikes you about this extraordinary correspondence is that in North Africa he begins as a private George Parkinson in 1940. By 1943 he is signing off as Lieutenant George Parkinson. As the ranks thinned, so the promotions accelerated, a further reflection of the tragedy of war. In July 1943 he wrote from New Guinea that the tales you read in the newspapers, Marge, my mother's name, about the mosquitoes are really not exaggerated. And the local mozzies must have a dietary preference for Queensland blood. A further letter came in October of 43 from the captain of George's unit, this time informing my mother of Lieutenant George Parkinson's death in combat against the Japanese at Milne Bay. My mother wrote a poem in honour of the 2nd 25th Battalion, which she recited to us as kids almost every day. George's captain, who also wrote of George Parkinson's life, the following: George had so much to live for, but that he had given his all. And he quoted this verse: "Here lie we, because we did not choose to shame the land from which we sprung. Life is perhaps no great thing to lose, but young men think it is, and we were young." As Prime Minister, it was my honour later and my privilege to place a flower on George Parkinson's grave at the Pomona War Cemetery just outside Port Moresby a few years ago. I read all these letters again last night in my study as I prepared for these remarks today. The paper and the envelopes are now brown and stained with age. But you know something? The message is not. And these letters are of no greater importance than the hundreds of thousands that have been exchanged between Australian families and their loved ones over a century, all proudly wearing the uniform of Australia. War, therefore, and its cascading impact down the generations, is a very personal thing. For the future, therefore, in honour of them, let us always be vigilant in our national defence, resolute in our diplomacy to prevent other wars, and forever loyal to the memory of those who have gone before us as we labour for our country's future. I thank you.